Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason here with Minga, and today we are talking about digital hall passes and the top three reasons that schools are looking at digital hall passes, and we'll turn that into the biggest benefits that schools are getting out of launching hall passes as well. So we are very excited to have you here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I'm going to kick off today since you've all come at some point, either early in the morning or in the middle of your morning, to join us today. And so I'd like to take a moment and just ask you a question, like kind of the top reasons that you're interested in hall passes right now. So I'm going to just launch a poll that I just pushed up to everyone. And if you wouldn't mind just starting with a quick contribution to our webinar today on what are the top reasons that you're interested in hall passes today and why you're here. I'll give you a second to read through some of those and fill those out. Nice. Let's see a couple more people filling them out there. And awesome. So and that one there. Someone threw an other up, and I'd love, we got our chat windows open. We're going to be using chat today. Whoever threw the other up, if you wouldn't mind just throwing in chat, it should be open, and just double check. Yep, it looks like it's open. If you wouldn't mind throwing into chat what panelists can chat with everyone. Attendees can chat with everyone. There we go. Just updated that. If you wouldn't mind throwing what was that other that's coming up there? Because I'm always curious when we see another. So someone's got something good coming in there, but right at the top of the list from here, everybody's thoughts here was data on hall pass usage. And I mean, that's a great place. We're gonna dig into some of that stuff and take a look at it. So we obviously we talk to a lot of schools across the country about hall pass usage. And we get, a fairly surprisingly, well, maybe it's not surprisingly, fairly narrow range of what people are looking for with hall passes. And, it's obviously at the end of the day, I think what we hear consistently from everyone is that, we're struggling, or there's a lot of struggle in the schools coming out of COVID with, back to kind of a lot of behavioral issues on campus, and in and out of the classroom, and roaming the hallways, and, associated with things like tardies and stuff like that, all seem to kind of link together in there. And my browser just crashed. And, I think from there, it's just looking at how do we start to manage that. So we're gonna do a little demo, go through, what hall pass usage can look like, or what it looks like typically in a high school. And during that period, we're going to actually dive into the top reasons that people are looking at hall passes. And we're also going to talk a little bit and do some interactive incentives and rewards. Dr. Ronnie, hey, thanks for joining us, Dr. Ronnie. And incentives and rewards, I like that. So around, is that maybe if you want to extend on the chat there, Ronnie, is that around hall pass usage, incenting and rewarding people for hall pass usage, or is that using hall passes for incentives and rewards, giving them extra time outside of the classroom? So, at the end of the day, we're in a period right now where we see a transition in education, continued transition in education from analog to digital, and one of the most recent elements of that transition has been the age-old kind of hall pass or method of hall pass that we're using in school. And the opportunity to now bring that hall pass into the digital realm. And what we see there, from what was being used before, everything from a chain to a, strap tied to a toilet seat with a hall pass module on it. And we've heard construction vests and bricks and rocks and pieces of wood and everything else in between as a physical pass, or written passes or passes on lanyards being used in the classroom, which can all be, effective ways to identify that a student in the hallway does have a hall pass. But once you go to any of those methods, what you don't get is data or control. You don't get the ability to share information between classrooms on, did this student already use 3 hall passes this morning, and should we give them some more? Or, over the last month, who's been using hall passes? Or we had an incident in the bathroom and we want to know who's everyone that had a hall pass during that period. And of course, all those come back to, first coming from a place of data. Once you have data and you're able to analyze and look at how hall passes are being used on campus, then we can start to extend into all sorts of different ways that we can implement, restrictions or enable opportunities and times for hall passes, and even control sometimes who, why, when, and with whom hall passes can exist as well. So, we're just gonna jump in a little bit right out of the gate. And since data is at the top of the list, I love starting with data. So what we're going to take a look at is some actual data on hall pass usage and the ability to drive into it. Because I think we get, when we boil it down, we're going to come down to 3 main areas. The first one, is for top reasons schools are looking for it, is actually for data. For everything else, the first thing we need to start with is a consistent process, a consistent, reliable, streamlined process in the classroom that all of our teachers can adapt. Once we have a consistent process, we can then move on to the second top reason, which is data around those hall passes are being used, how that process is being used on campus by classroom, by teacher, by student, or aggregately across our entire community. And then third is, once we have a streamlined process, once we have the data, then we can implement control and programming around how, when, and by who hall passes can be used. And when we link those things together, we end up with a very effective hall pass system, as long as, of course, it's adopted effectively by our staff and community. So at Minga, obviously, we're not a hall pass platform. We call Minga a student engagement platform or a campus management platform. But one of our most popular modules right now available is, of course, our digital hall pass module. It is integrated and built right on top of our digital ID module. The Minga campus management platform is a modular system. And so you can, choose and select modules that you do want to enable. And so with the ID and hall pass module together, you have, we offer a very effective, very easy to implement, set up, and train hall pass system that is also very easy to use in the classroom. And what you get from that is something that most schools have never, ever seen before. And that is the ability to look and see how hall passes are being used across our entire school community. So I'm taking a look at some real school data here and showing you some real school data here on the last 28 days, the last month of hall pass usage at a high school here in the United States. And we can see trending over time. We're looking at first at the hall pass summary. We can see how hall passes are being used, what types of passes are being used. If they're trending up and down day to day, we see that generally speaking, they're actually, fairly consistent this is measured right now by the total number of time outside of the classroom. So we can see this is fairly consistent over time. We can see how hall passes are being used. We can get a glance in the summary at our top users. These are the top students that are using hall passes on campus. And we can also very easily see the top approvers or the top staff that are approving and or creating hall passes. We can drill down into an analysis of every student across our campus from these see all buttons. We can drive into summaries for particular students or staff. We can even look at a hall pass by hall pass history of our entire school, or drill it down and slice it and filter it in a myriad of different ways, like by student, by teacher, by hall pass type, and even see what types of hall passes are being used. Once we have this data, and getting to this data, can be a lot simpler than you think. And one of the really nice parts about going digital like this, and it doesn't have to be with us. There are, several other great hall pass vendors out there as well. Obviously we're biased. We think we're the best, but we give you the opportunity to evaluate and test that for yourself. But once you have that, one of the really nice things here is we keep this history forever. So we can quickly drill into hall pass usage for the entire school year. Or if you want to start looking at things like hall pass usage year over year, that data will be available to you so you can see how things are trending over time. But before we get this great data, what we need to come back to is step number one. And it might not be the first thing that comes to the top of your mind, but one of the top reasons that schools are looking for a digital hall pass solution is because they're actually looking for a more streamlined, scalable, and manageable process for their entire school community. So I am going to I'm just going to stop the share and share a new screen. So as I mentioned, we're looking at Minga right now, and I'm just going to walk through a little bit on streamlined hall pass workflow. Now we offer a handful of different workflows that are kind of built into the Minga system that you can implement in the classroom, or and sometimes outside the classroom. Other areas of hall pass usage could be counselors, health and wellness offices, athletics, leadership, media are all great reasons hall passes can be used. Library. So there's a few different places, but we offer a handful of different workflows. But getting down to a consistent workflow that's easily trainable and will be supported and adopted by your staff is essential to getting accurate data. If it's not supported by your staff or your students in the big picture, and they circumvent the system, then the hall pass data that we get out will not be an accurate reflection of how students are actually using the hallways. So it's very important to focus first on picking a workflow that your staff and teachers and students are going to support long-term, and that is very easy to train and will not overwhelm anyone with additional training, technical, or PD requirements. So for that reason, we did a lot of testing right out of the gate, before we even got into the technical nuts and bolts on workflows in the classroom that made sense for everyone, that could still leverage technology to make it easy, but would also be very well supported in the classroom by staff and students. So I'm going to actually walk through that a little bit in real time. So, I mentioned Minga is a modular platform. So here we can see that we have our digital ID and hall pass module enabled. They are built and dependent on each other. So the hall pass module is dependent on the ID module. So once we've done that, we go through some very quick setup. We do select our workflow. Obviously, we want to enable the hall pass module so that teachers and staff right here can both grant and create passes. And our default best practices workflow is actually a student-driven workflow. And this is made possible today by the fact that the majority of schools, especially in high school and middle school environments today, are one-to-one device on campus of some form. Usually, Chromebooks or an iPad or something like that. And since students have access to their own device, that means that we can take advantage of that, and Wi-Fi in the classroom now, of course, available to everyone as well. We can take advantage of that and let the student do the vast majority of the lifting and technical work around or sort of work around creating hall passes on campus. And the teacher is there as a guide and, in the approval process. But our best practices workflow does not even require a teacher ever to touch a device. They don't need to touch a laptop. They don't need to go back. They do not need to interrupt their classroom. They're able to do everything by checking this box right here, which is students can grant their own hall passes. Then we select a default hall pass duration. So how long do hall passes last for students when they create them? And then, so that's our setup. That's all the setup required for the hall pass module. And then under here, under types, we're going to select the type of hall pass or hall passes that students can create. And we recommend keeping that very simple as well. We don't want to give students a ton of choice. We want to, enable them and empower them to create their hall pass and create some sense around accountability for doing that. But we also want to make it simple. So in this case, you'll notice here under student created, the only one selected here is the restroom pass. These are all default pass types that we provide you. You can create any new hall pass type you want. It's very simple. Just click create your type and give it a name and set up how it's, how it can be used on campus. So we create that restroom type is able to be created by students. And then we get into right from there. The step that we skipped over here is, of course, synchronizing Minga, the roster in Minga with the roster in your student information system, which is done under here via the API manager, which is going to automatically synchronize Minga with your student information system and pull the limited but essential student data that we need to operate, which is first name, last name, email address, ID number, and grade. And of course, since we do have student data, we pass the mustard on SDPC, Student Data Privacy Consortium rules, and meet or exceed all those rules and requirements around data safety, residency, and protection in all of the US states and federal requirements. So, we're going to synchronize our student information. Then we're going to integrate in with Microsoft or Google, whichever you're using on campus, and students are simply going to click sign in. Go to Minga and click sign in with Google or sign in with Microsoft. So no usernames or passwords or anything else like that to manage. Very easy to deploy. Once that's done, we get right into classroom testing for our best practices student-driven workflow, which is Miss or Mr. Teacher, can I go to the bathroom? And the teacher would respond and say, yes, Jason, go ahead. Please create your hall pass. The student would pop onto their Chromebook. Right here, I'm in Chrome. We are also a native mobile app, so we can be used on, iPads or iPhones or Android devices, as well as a native app or in any modern browser. So I'm just popping to app.minga.io, sign in with Google, click on Student Tools, and click Create Hall Pass. Here I see there's that restroom pass that was made available to me. My default time, which is the only option I can select here, is 5 minutes. And then I'm going to tag it to my teacher. There's my teacher right there, and click Start Pass. And always check your demo settings to make sure you don't have a restriction on your demo. And it looks like I am part of a no pass list, which does not let me create passes. So click on Student Tools, click Create Hall Pass. Tag your teacher and click Start Pass. And there I go. My pass is created. My digital ID pops up with my picture right on it, with my hall pass on it, a live timestamp, and scanning across some digital animation to show that this is actually live hall pass and sneaky little student didn't take a screenshot. Ronnie, I see your question there. I'll dive right into that in a second. And in this case, I turn my Chromebook around to my teacher, show them that I have created my hall pass, and off to the bathroom I go. I leave my Chromebook there. I'm not required to bring any device with me. If you're using a lanyard in the classroom, you can pair this with a lanyard. You don't need to, but they could still take a lanyard if they want and go out in the hallway. And that's it. On the teacher or admin side, now that this hall pass is running and the student is out in the hallway, any staff member on campus or staff members that you select can click on click on teacher tools on Minga on any device, including a mobile device for hallway security staff. Click on view active passes, and easy to see at a glance all the active passes on campus right now. You'll see it shows the time, it shows when it was started, it shows the student's name and where the student's coming from, the teacher, the type of pass. You've got a summary of the types of pass on the dashboard here that are being used in real time. You can filter that down too. And in our next update, you can actually even set this dashboard up into auto refresh. So that can be sitting up in a, on an office monitor somewhere so that you're always seeing, and have at a glance the active passes operating on campus. And that's it. In this very simple, Ronnie, to kind of address your teacher, in this very simple default workflow, nobody else is ever required to do anything. The pass will expire automatically in 5 minutes. The expectation, the student has set it, is that they, created a pass for 5 minutes and they'll be back in 5 minutes. When that pass expires, their Chromebook's up on their desk. When that pass expires, I'm just going to end that pass early. That hall pass will go red on their screen to show that it has been expired. But in this case, we don't send a notification to anyone else because you can't depend on the teacher having a device on them or anything else like that. Basically, in this workflow, what happens in this case is that now that the pass is expired, the student, for all intents and purposes, the student is in the hallway without a hall pass. And that's it. So, they should have been back in 5 minutes and they weren't. Now they're in the hallway without a hall pass. Now, while this workflow does appear a little bit different and unique because, of course, nobody's required to end the pass, there is some method to that madness. And the reason no one's required to end a pass in this case is that staff or students are going to frequently forget to end their pass. So that means that in those cases, even though they've come back to class, but someone closed their Chromebook or they put it away or the teacher forgot or whoever was supposed to end the hall pass did not end the hall pass. And so because it was forgotten, now we have a data discrepancy between how long the student was actually in the hallway. They actually came back on time. But since they forgot to end their pass, it appears that they never came back from the hall pass. Now, the other issue in this workflow, where the hall pass expires automatically, if the student didn't come back on time, we also have a data discrepancy because the hall pass itself is showing that it expired automatically. It shows they did come back on time, but in fact, they didn't. Now, the reason we choose this workflow as our best practice is that this happens way less than in the other case where people forget to end their hall passes. So our best practices workflow reflects which is the most accurate process that you can have in the classroom that is also the easiest. Now, if the teacher notices that this student hasn't come back or they come back 20 minutes later and they're obviously late, there are other ways that we can mark that down so that we've tracked that the student did come back late. Especially through our behavior system, but in this hall pass system, that won't do it. Now the teacher would simply create a behavioral element for that student. You'll see on Minga, if that's the case, then they could actually pop right into teacher tools. They could click and track a guidance behavior and say they had a no or late hall pass, tag the student, And now we've tracked that behavior issue for that student as well, that they didn't have a hall pass, or they took a hall pass, but they came out way too late. And in this case, that would complete our best practices workflow overall, integrating our behavior module into this as well. And so in the system, though, the big benefits of this is the most accurate data you're going to get. It's a very easy training and workflow in the classroom. And it's the easiest for students and staff. And integrated in with this method of tracking the behavior for the instances when students don't come back on time, it also integrates and captures those situations all the time for students that are not working alongside with the hall pass module. Now, once you've done that and you've got this consistent workflow, we do always recommend 4 to 8 weeks of just data. Don't put in restrictions, just see how hall passes are being used when you first implement the system, even though you're going to be really tempted to put in a bunch of controls. But now that we've used the hall pass system, you can step into back to the hall pass manager, go back to that data reporting that we've talked about before, where now you're going to get hall pass summary over time. You can do it over the last 8 weeks. I'll come back again to some more interesting data. So we click into reports. We're going to look at the last 8 weeks of data. We're going to look at our top users here. We can even drill into that, look at all our top users, see our top users and be like, oh, they got a lot of hall passes going on. Ronnie, yes, of course, you're gonna, I just saw your question that come up. So around scheduling training, you're gonna connect with your customer experience manager that reached out to you probably a few weeks ago, and they will 100% set up some training times for you and for your staff to get training for everyone. So if you don't know who that is, don't hesitate to reach out to me, Ronnie, and we'll get you set up right away. I'll connect you with the right person. But look in your inbox and you should have some emails from them connecting with you from a few weeks ago. So, so from this now, we're going to identify our top users. You're going to click on summaries to see if those users are, what types of hall passes they're using, how often they're using them. Is this person actually a problem, outside of the classroom? Are we having issues with this student? And if they are, I'm going to go back to my demo Minga there. We get down to sometimes some of the fun stuff on the hall pass manager, which is under settings, we can now start to implement controls. We give you 3 primary ways, I guess 4 you can think about, 4 primary settings and control methods to restrict or manage how hall passes are used in the classroom. So the first one is just daily aggregates right out of the gate. How many hall passes can students create per day? So in this case, it's set up for 4. A total of 8, so that includes staff created passes too. Those settings might be high or low, but you don't want it to be 1. We always want to cover off the majority of hall pass usages. Should always get a yes. Should be yes. We want yes training for everyone so that they use the system and don't try to circumvent it. So total number of hall passes students can have per day. Total number of hall passes that can be active at one time. So that's going to be should reflect the total number of students that could be in the hallway at any given time. These aggregate settings include also for student workflow, the default student hall pass duration, so how long that default pass lists, as well as once a student creates a pass, how long do they have to wait before they can create another one? So that's the hall pass duration restriction between student passes. So those are the aggregate controls. Now we can get into granular controls per student. So we can determine we have a no pass, a 1 pass, and a 2 pass list. So that's students that don't get passes at all, get 1 pass per day or 2 passes per day. Fairly straightforward. Usually you kind of start from top to bottom. If you're having a problem with a student, give them a 2 pass restriction. If that's not helping, you can move them to the no pass restriction. And in that case, staff have to create passes. Then over to these bulk controls over here, blackout windows, which are periods where students cannot create hall passes or teachers will get warnings. And that would be, typically speaking, say the first and last 10 minutes, as well as the time in between classes. So the first and last 10 minutes of every class and the time in between classes. And that's going to ensure that students are actually in the class, have asked permission to go to the hallway before they go out. And kind of the fan favorite is the no party group, which allows you to set up a list or groups of students that cannot be in the hallway together. And you can create lots of no party groups. And that's going to basically, say these 3 people can't be in the hallway together. That's this group. These 3 people can't be in the hallway together. That's a different group. So the moment one of those people create a pass, then the other members of that group will not be able to have a pass during that time. Now, as much as you're going to want to go control, and implement all sorts of controls, always remember that in order to understand how the hall pass system is working, the fewest number of controls to get what you want is the best. So what that's going to get us through those 3 things. So now we started with a streamlined process, that workflow in the classroom. In this case, a student-driven workflow was the one I went through. Then we moved on to the ability to, from that consistent workflow, capture all the data that we wanted, so that we can now see how hall passes are being used on campus and make data-driven, quantitative decisions around, how hall passes are operating, who's abusing them, when are they being abused, how are they being abused, and then into number 3, the ability to now very simply implement restrictions to take control of those abuse situations or those problem areas, and bring control of the hallways back to our schools. Now, I covered off that student-driven workflow where the hall passes end automatically, but we do support. We have lots of reasons that we'd be happy to tell you in detail, and why we think that's the best workflow. Summarized, of course, at the top, that it's the easiest to implement in the classroom. It's the least interruptive to instruction time, and it gives you the most accurate data. But we also support staff-driven workflows, which would be staff-created passes. The hybrid workflow, of course, always exists where students can create passes and staff can create passes. We do also support where hall passes do need to be ended. There are scenarios where that might be the case. So that could be a combination of a student or staff-driven workflow where the pass would remain running and then have to be ended. And like I said, there are some situations where that might make a lot of sense. And in addition to the basics that I covered off here, there is, what we walked through here should cover between 85 and 95% of hall pass usage on, the typical middle or high school campus. But you also have the ability to do all sorts of other interesting workflows, like create passes for groups. Like I could create a pass for my whole group here, my entire book club. I have the ability to change the times when I go to staff driven. I can create passes for different durations. And even interestingly, I can also schedule pass times. So in this case, I want these passes to start tomorrow at 2 p.m. And now that pass is going to be scheduled for tomorrow and will automatically kick off for those users tomorrow at 2 p.m. And from that, the ability to transfer students as well. And a brand new feature that we've just implemented based on feedback from a number of schools is the ability to create pass types that can be allocated to certain groups of students. For example, we might have a wellness pass. And that wellness pass might ignore the limits and be student created. So for students that have an LEA or an LPA, that includes, say, access to a nurse whenever they need it, or the ability to take a break from the classroom whenever they need it. You can now create passes that support those students without them having to ask the teacher, because this will allow them and ignore the limits and stuff like that. And then you can actually restrict this pass just down to that group of students. So they'll be the only ones that have access to it or see it available. So not only can hall passes be used, to take control back and create simple workflows and streamline the process in the classroom, but it also becomes a safety and a wellness component as well, where we can continue to support students in different demographics with different needs automatically, instead of in ways that are going to be very easily communicated across campus, because teachers don't need to know exactly what student has access to what pass type at any given moment. Students will have that ability for themselves, and then they can exercise it as they see fit, depending on how that system and process might work on campus for you. So, and the other feature and function that we do see schools using is you can also create passes for transferring students. So I might want to transfer a student to a counselor, but I want that to ensure that that counselor received them. So in that case, as a teacher, I can create the pass, a transfer pass, transfer that student to the counselor, and then that counselor will end and receive the student when they get there. So we'll see it created and received by two different staff members on campus to ensure that those passes are used properly. So that I'm going to leave it at that for from the official demo portion, and make sure we leave a little bit of time here for Q&A. I know it's after 8 already, and people are going to get ready for their morning. So, please, if you have any questions, and feel free to throw questions into the chat if you had any questions about the workflows we used or the functions. But to sum it up, the top 3 reasons that schools are using hall passes today. Number 1 is for a consistent, streamlined workflow in the classroom with training support for all your staff. Number 2 is to get data on how hall passes are actually being used on campus to make data-driven decisions or have data-driven conversations with students and or families. And number 3, to then automatically implement controls from a central console that will manage and control, restrict, and enforce how hall passes are used across your entire community. So thank you very much for your time today. If you have any questions or would like to, get and learn a little bit more, we will send this recording out to everyone. You can also sign up for a demo right on our website, which will let you automatically book a time, and that's at www.minga.io. And or feel free to follow up through the email that you get from after this Hall Pass webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to go ahead and throw them up in the chat window if there's anything that you haven't had yet. It looks like I guess my presentation must have been so good that there's no questions left. So really appreciate your time, everyone, for showing up. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful morning today. And we look forward to, I do got one question. No, Ronnie, I'll email you your contact so that you have the right person. Make sure we get you connected properly. So have a great morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to helping you, with Minga. The Minga's our campus management student engagement platform, everything from digital IDs to hall passes to behavior to student communication, event management, check-in, attendance management, and more. So thanks so much for your time, everyone. Have a wonderful day.